Um, but thank you for joining me today for the Science Hub Coffee Chat. I appreciate it.
Yes.
The first question I always like to ask is, what got you interested in doing research as just kind of a general skill set, just to get kind of an idea of how you got to this place?
Okay. I think my first interest in research happened when I was in graduate school. Before that, I had absolutely no idea what research was. It was just some term that I knew that was, that was thrown around that I would figure out once I went to graduate school. So I think it was the professors there and the stuff that I was working on, and the whole idea of working on a problem that didn't have any answer, just sort of the unknown. And that was what I found exciting and in general, just sort of scary as well.
Fair enough. So going into what you're doing today, like what are the big questions that you would like to answer with your research? What's the overall purpose that you're kind of trying to figure out with it all?
I work mostly in mathematical modeling of diseases. And I have worked on mathematical models of polio, hepatitis B, Zika, as well as other diseases that are less well known, like guinea worm disease, visceral leishmaniasis, and others. So the ultimate goal in the work would, of course, be to figure out how to eradicate the disease or bring the disease incidence to zero. But since that's oftentimes not the case, something that's not achievable, I would say the big question that I'm trying to answer is how can we reduce the disease in a particular region, say problem regions of the world where the disease resurfaces. So in most of my work, I'm interested only in an individual's behavior as opposed to the behavior of the population as a whole. And for example, it would seem that if there's a vaccine or a treatment around, then it would be in everyone's best interest to get that vaccine or treatment, right? You're helping yourself and helping others. But that's oftentimes not the case, as seen with just the flu vaccine each year. So when there's a vaccine or a treatment that's available, it always comes with a cost to the individual, whether that cost is real or perceived. So I use game theory in an attempt to determine the optimal protection level needed for an individual.
Very cool. So given that, in mathematics, as I'm learning, there's different ways to get involved in research, whereas, a lot of students typically hear about being in a lab. From what I'm learning is that a lot of math professors don't have labs. So how do you recruit students given that you don't have that traditional necessarily like physical space that other professors might use to recruit?
Yes, so I recruit students in all kinds of ways. I have recruited them out of my classrooms that I'm teaching. I have also recruited them just from talking to other professors, like, hey, I have a project. Do you have any students who you think might be interested in it? So if it doesn't come directly out of my class, I would say the largest portion of students that I have recruited have been through summer programs that I have had funding for. So these are REU type programs, and I have gotten most of my students through summer work.
So how did those students who are in your summer programs or that you've met through other programming, like how have you developed that relationship, or how did they develop that relationship with you? Is there a certain type of communication that you're looking for? Are you looking for interest in a certain area? What makes you think that this student would be a good fit?
Okay, so as far as how the communication goes, I would say, I mean, I'm really sort of laid back. Students can just email me. They can come by and talk to me directly. So I think most of the initial conversations actually happen like that. And what was your second question, actually?
Yeah, just trying to think about how we would want them to communicate with you in terms of is it over email? Is it through in person building the relationship? Especially if it's another professor trying to see if a student would work well with you. What are you looking for exactly?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I'm looking for is just a genuine interest in working on a project, and a genuine interest or curiosity in the mathematics, whatever that may be in that project. So um, it's not so much about the prerequisites for me. I can work with somebody who has even as little as just a calculus course. So it's more about motivation and just, really wanting to work on an actual project.
Great. So that helps answer the question, because I know a lot of students are going to think like, well, what level of math do I need to then get involved in research? So I'm really happy that you're able to address that.
Yeah, you really don't need that much at all.
Awesome.
You just need an interest. Yeah.
Very cool. So then with that, what is the role of an undergraduate working with you in research? Do they have really specific functions that you like them to do? Or are you more flexible depending on what the project is? How does that look when they are working with you?
I would say I'm pretty flexible, and I involve them in all different levels of the project. So basically anything I would do to work on that research project, I would get them to help me with. So whether it's background information in a literature search or the actual computations involved, writing it up, I'm interested in having the student help in all of those areas.
Well, and then what do you see as your role working with them? Obviously you're an advisor, and so you're leading them, but what is the specific role that you like to see or like to have when working with students?
Um, I think my role as a mentor is just to encourage them, to make them feel comfortable, and to know that they can do this. They can do research. They just need the confidence to do it. So I'm there really to help build their confidence up and give them small bite-sized tasks that they can accomplish to do just that.
And so what I know this will be a big question for a lot of students is, what are the skills that you see them developing in your lab? And then how do those skills apply if they decide to go into a different industry than, a research-based career?
Um, so they will develop lots of skills working on a project with me. So writing skills is a big one that would come. Presenting skills is also another big one. I like all of my students to do a presentation at the end of whatever their time working with me is, whether it's a summer program or just a student that I recruited for the semester. Um, so those types of skills of learning to write things down clearly, that definitely goes over to a job. Same thing with presenting. You may be needing to present the work that you're doing in a fashion that other people can understand. So learning who your audience is and how to project your information to that given audience. That's difficult at times. And so those are two big skills that I would say that they take out of working with me.
Great. And then the last question I have for you today is, what do you want students to take away from their time doing research with you?
I want students to take away, I guess, the thought to themselves that they can do original research, that it isn't this big scary thing that I thought it was when I first started. And I want them to come away with more confidence in themselves, and feeling like they have the ability to work on something where they don't know the answer to it, um, and get comfortable, I suppose, with being uncomfortable. I think that's necessary when you do research. So I would say that those things are the big takeaway messages that I would want students to have.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today and for providing some information about yourself and about your research. I'm sure that students will appreciate learning about all this.
Mhm. Welcome.